I'm here to talk about something super interesting that we found when we did the 2024 annual State of Email survey here. So one of the questions we asked was, do you know what your email ROI is? And we were super surprised when we saw the results. 72% of folks who filled in the survey did not know what their email ROI was. And that got us thinking here at Litmus. Like, what is email ROI? What does it mean to us now? What does it mean to marketers right now? My name is Jana Mystery. I am the Director of Brand and Content Marketing at Litmus.
I am Cynthia Price. I am the SVP of Marketing here at Litmus, and I have been here for about 5 years. But I've been in the email space and following these trends and how we talk about ROI for close to 15 years now. So some of these things have been pet peeves of mine that I have had on my list for a long time. So I'm excited for a little bit of, excuse us if Jana and I have a little bit of therapy in front of the audience here today.
Love that bit of email ROI therapy. Okay, so let's get going. So how do you define email ROI? What, from your perspective, what is email ROI?
So I think part of what has always been really incongruous to me about talking about email ROI. And I think our obsession with email ROI is real. And I'm sure that everyone listening to this has seen figures like $42 for every $1 spent or $36 for every $1 spent. And I think that came from a time when marketers started really having access to all kinds of data that we didn't have before. And so in our little email world, we had been over here tracking conversions and tracking open rates and click rates and all of the other things that we know sort of help us understand whether our programs are performing. But the ROI number, the sort of investment number, was a hard thing for us to measure. And so when our finance teams all got wind of the fact that lots of these things were measurable, they started to ask about email specifically. And I think that what we found early on was that email obviously knocks all other channels way out of the park, considering that it's an unfair competition, really, in so many words. It's an audience that already not only knows you as a brand, but also has expressed some sort of affinity towards your brand by seeing value in some version of what you're going to send them over email. So I think that, the ROI is really, really strong. It's much easier for e-com and retail businesses to determine what the ROI is, because they can very clearly say from a click down to an actual sale, here's what this meant for us, here's what this got us. But I think what's missing from that part of the conversation is that email is really about so much more than kind of last touch conversions. Email is almost like a little microcosm of the full funnel itself. The email is about brand awareness. It's about moving people through different life cycles based on who they are as an audience, based on what their interests are, based on, their knowledge level of your brand. And I think that when we only measure it from an ROI standpoint, we kind of forget all of the things that led to that conversion point, that were likely many, many, many emails across a long period of time. And especially in the B2B worlds or in the nonprofit worlds, it's just harder to sort of track back that what did this one email do for us as a business.
Yeah, and speaking of things that's hard or challenging in email, I think this was specific in my role, in previous incarnations of my role as an email marketing manager, being asked to get buy-in for a new platform, and you want to move to a new ASP, or you want to use a different tool to make your email program more effective or more sophisticated, but you need to be able to give finance, or you need to give your boss a number on what this is going to bring back to the team, what this is going to bring back to the company. So you need that ROI number, we got obsessed by that number because we're like, this is the only way we're going to get buy-in. This is the only way we're going to be able to get the tools we need. We need to prove the value of email. And this is the number that does it for us. And I don't know whether that was like a misspent little journey that we went on at one point in time. And there's a bigger picture, like you said, because email drives so much that is non-quantifiable in a way, and it's challenging. And I think we're now getting to that point where people are understanding this, it's like, oh, it's not just one number. It's way more than that.
Yeah. And it's sort of the sum total of an experience where it's most likely the the most frequent experience that lots of audiences are going to have with your brand. It's most likely the most the sort of closest experience to, for lack of a better word, it's the one where we know you better than anybody. You know, if you see an ad out there, certainly we can target by segments and target by, personalized based on certain things we know about you. Um, but at the same time, it's our responsibility more and more now, especially as email marketers, to send you what's really valuable to you. And it's just it's not a fair contest to say, like, here's this one email might not have performed as well from a revenue hard dollar standpoint as other emails, but it might have been part of a stream of emails that ended up across an entire month's time or an entire quarter's time, generating X amount of revenue or conversions. I think the other thing there too is that, finance, it was almost like we had to start using the word ROI because finance didn't want to hear about great click rates. That didn't mean anything to them. They didn't want to hear about, website visits or, those kinds of things. So I think it's really valuable. And while I love that email wins all the contests, obviously that's something that we believe strongly in, and I think it does have the highest ROI. It's just that it's such an isolated view of a conversation. It's like when we have we have ads that are built for brand awareness, and we have ads that are built for lower funnel conversion points. And it's as if you're putting all of those ads through that same sort of success metric, which is just sort of an unfair place to start because they just have different goals.
Absolutely. And that kind of tracks back to another finding from the State of Email survey that we ran early this year. So yes, 72% of marketers said they do not know what their email ROI number is. And yet 52%, so almost like an overwhelming majority of marketers, also ranked email as their most effective channel. So if folks aren't measuring email performance and email effectiveness by email ROI, what are they measuring that with? And that tracks back to what you mentioned about it being a full funnel experience, about being really intimate and knowing your audience and thinking about it from a brand awareness perspective, and from thinking about it from a perspective of building relationships with your audience through email. And you can't measure that in isolation because it's multiple events over a series of time. And that series of time for some businesses and brands, that customer journey is what, years in the making. It isn't like a few weeks or a few days or even a few months. It is years in the making. And that's where email is really helpful to these brands and organizations to be able to stay in touch with that audience and keep nurturing them over the course of however long they need. Because there's the other stat out there, like 95% of your audience are not in the buying cycle and only 5% are. So if you are using email to focus on as like a conversion point, you're only talking to 5% of your audience, which means you're spending so much time and effort just on 5% of your audience versus using email as a brand awareness, customer journey building, all-encompassing channel that it could be, and then focus on 95% of your audience. So it's like, that's where email's true strength lies. And that's why maybe kind of forgetting a little bit about the ROI, like the specific ROI, might be the way forward for marketers.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting, right? That if 95% of the people are not currently in a buying cycle, what are you getting out of that email send? You're getting you're getting just sort of eyeballs on your brand. And ideally that's a really positive experience in the inbox. Just that them remembering that they're subscribed to your list should be a solid thing. And then two, you're getting some level of value that isn't about the end sale. And that should, if funnels were linear, which we now know that they aren't, if it should move you down an inch every step of the way, that there should be something that's happening in every email, help strengthen that relationship in some way. And that can be based on what you know about them. So, it could be a content piece that that would resonate with them. It could be an interesting conversation that, we thought that they would appreciate, or it can be sort of actual product or, product more salesy content. I feel like when you and I got into this industry, Jana, correct me if I'm wrong, but there used to be sort of some general conventional wisdom about like send them emails 3 times and then send a sales email once, or like there were sort of these weird equations that we put out there that were like you should focus on the value for 5 weeks, and then on the 6 weeks you can ask for the sale. And I don't think that that kind of simplification is necessarily helpful, but the framing of it, I think, is still the right way to think about it. That, you can't always ask for the sale. You're going to turn them off. You're going to wreck the relationship, and you're not gonna bring them closer to your brand. And I think that's where we have almost done ourselves a disservice by teaching finance that it is. I was just reading somebody smarter than me in marketing used the quote, marketing's not a pinball or a gumball machine, that it's not about money in and gumball out, that like you can't actually increase the return from email by turning up the volume on it or turning up the frequency. Some of that can happen, but you have to sort of maintain that equilibrium between, they've got to be getting something from you at the same time that you're asking them to consider your product or something like that.
Yeah, I remember when it was like you send a lead nurture email once a week, and then they'll receive 7 of those, and then you can send this, and it just doesn't work because buying cycles are so complicated these days
Yeah.
because consumers are getting bombarded with emails, paid ads, they're on organic social, they are listening to influencers now as well. There are so many different ways that people are um, being in touch with brands, and brands are being in touch with them, that the way we typically thought about the funnel, really, it's just a spaghetti mess. Like someone comes in at the top, there's this whole spaghetti junction mess thing going on in the middle, and then they get spat out at the end. And that's eventually when they're gonna buy from you. But it's yeah, you're absolutely right. It's kind of we've moved on since
Yeah.
we first started an email, and
Well,
it's changed.
and I think the same sort of logic applies even in the sort of high converting, highly, analytical world of e-com and retail. It's not like that you see so much stuff about, quit. Everybody's just waiting for sales now. They're waiting for the shopping cart abandonment data now or emails now. We're on to each other. We know what the game is. We know there will be a discount, but you can't make every email a discount or everyone will be onto you. Like there's sort of those little things where you have to sort of make sure that all the emails that they aren't necessarily engaging with are still doing something positive to move that relationship forward.
This is very, very strange example. I'm going to share it with you anyway, but many, many years ago, I subscribed to emails from a specific online clothing retailer. And at some point, I knew I was going to have the intention of buying some new clothes from them, but it never really happened. And then it wasn't until sometime this year, I was like going on a really big vacation. I looked at my wardrobe. I was like, I have nothing to wear on this vacation. And this brand has always shown up in the inbox, has always shown up really well in the inbox with some good emails, not too long, crafting some really good content. I remember them. I remember that they showed up in my inbox. So when I thought, hey, I need clothes for my vacation, they were the first brand that I went to. I went to my inbox, found their emails, and I started buying from them. And I bought a ludicrous amount of clothes from them. But that's kind of that's the power of email. I remembered that brand specifically from their emails. I remember that I get those emails consistently. I kind of like what's in there. It's presented really well. It speaks to me as a person who's looking at female who's looking for clothes. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to them. So like that's exactly what you're talking about, Cynthia.
Yeah.
Like the idea that you show up in the inbox well and you craft that relationship. And yet I wasn't opening every single one of the emails they were sending. But years on after initially subscribing to their emails, I remembered them and I made a lot of purchases from them in one
Yeah.
place.
Well, and if that company was obsessed with analytics, which I'm sure they are on some level, they probably can't even track
Yeah.
the attribution point from when you first joined the list. And that work is sort of silent and would go if it would look as if this was wasted effort to have you on the email list for, for any length of time, but really you were just not in a buying cycle. And then once you were, of course, the top of mind, like the fact that they sent you an email, however often they did, kept them top of mind on some level. And again, with that positive experience, we used to always talk about how, remember those cell phone commercials where it would be like the new guy gets the new phone. Or if you sign up new, you get the new phone, you get the
Yeah.
free iPhone, you get everything else. And the people who'd been there forever sort of were stuck, having to upgrade their phone on their own. I always think of that with like as an analogy with email audiences, that a lot of times we put all this thought and design work and copywriting and agencies involved on, trying to draw people in at the top of the funnel, when we just know categorically that the conversion rate on that experience is going to be so tiny. But it's worth it to us because we need to get the attention of the people who are going to come through. And then I feel like, I think we don't do this. And I think anybody who really cares about email doesn't do this. But I do see a lot of brands sort of phone in the email experience as sort of an automatic gimme, or I'm just going to send out more promos, more promos, more promos, and not think about this holistic sort of journey that they're on.
That journey goes beyond top of funnel as well. It's like when they're a customer too. And I think that's another critical point where like email ROI and the customer journey, when they're actually a customer and you want to keep them retained as customers, having that email ROI as a metric can be a little bit of a foolish metric, because surely at that point you want to measure attention, you want to measure product usage, you want to measure like how much they're buying, like physics, like that's kind of ROI, but like retention is probably one of the more important goals for email once they're actually brought in as a customer too. It's like how to use email to keep customers happy if you don't necessarily want them to convert. There's nothing to convert on.
And also sort of who can we keep in that brand awareness category or in that brand awareness sort of nurture flow, and not pressure them. I think there's so much value in giving the folks who we know are never going to buy a positive experience anyway, because they become our influencers, they become our content sharers, they become people who are interested in the brand. And I think that we have there is such a risk of ruining our, sort of not just brand affinity, but just sort of our influencers and our people who are most interested. If somebody's going to sign up for an email newsletter from a brand they have no intention of ever buying for, I'm super interested in that audience. Why? Who are you going to tell about it? What do you want to know? Where are you interested in the content, or are you just interested in knowing what's happening? Like there's so many things to that I think us being honest about the fact that not everybody on our email audience is a fish in a barrel waiting to buy a deal from us, like that some of them are there for all sorts of different reasons.
Yes. And I think that's yeah, like you said, we should be fine with that. We should be okay with that. As long as they are being an active and engaged member of your audience, because obviously engagement is very, very important when it comes to inbox placement. As long as they are still that, I don't see there being any harm in them being a part of your list, because you really do never know. Like they may become an influencer, like you said, they may become a customer somewhere so far down the line you haven't even really thought about it. So I think that was actually one of the so three of the top goals that marketers said that they consider as part of their email marketing: is sales, retention, engagement, conversion, and usage. But I know there was a bit of a friction point, because those are the most popular. So retention was up there as being one of the most popular. Mm-hmm. However, it was not one of the highest priority for marketers. And I think that might also come down to the fact that retention and engagement also are so hard to measure well, which is probably why a lot of marketers try to fall back a little bit on the ROI, because that then at least there's a number to say, hey, this is how successful email is. Retention, customer retention is not hard to measure. And then when you throw all the channels in there that customers are getting bombarded with, it just makes it even harder.
Well, and it obviously is so industry dependent, but I do think that there's something to that where it's like there's a way to measure retention and there's a way to measure who got your emails. correlation versus causation, really hard to say. And how much did an email experience, change from your experience with a brand? If you're a product like Litmus, I feel like that's a stretch. That's a long one. Can email help with retention? 100% yes. When it comes to like B2B or retail or B2C or retail, there are sort of goals. I see a lot of companies have goals in place that are about sort of reselling, and they talk a lot about how, our previous customers are our best customers moving forward. And, but again, at the same time, you can't just, if I buy something from you today, my experience after that is really critical. All of my transactional emails that you send me, everything that you send me about shipping, when you come at me again with another opportunity or another discount or thank me for that, it's the kickoff of such a long relationship that you need to treat it with all kinds of care and sort of thoughtfulness in terms of, we just got potentially a customer for life here, and email is really the most important place we're going to interact with them. Whereas before they buy something, email is one of many, who knows what's going to happen here. But if they do buy something, then email becomes really critical. And your need to get email right and not personalize in the wrong way and use the wrong first name or get their account type wrong, or all of those things have to be so locked up and clear, that you want them to know that you do know who they are and that you care.
I love the idea what you just said about every subscriber thinking of that about them as a customer for life, and not thinking about them as like just another person on your list, because then that really positions email as a way of like, okay, so if they're genuinely going to be a customer for life, how do you treat them as a customer from the beginning of that relationship? As soon as they hit subscribe on that first email or newsletter or demand gen form that they've built in, like treat them like a customer right at the beginning. And I can't even like imagine how fruitful that relationship is if you just have that mindset shift.
And it's such a, I feel like when I first started having this conversation about emails, we were all talking about customer experience and how much that mattered. So it was things like Amazon offering free shipping, or, brands like, who was a good brand? Zappos was always like doing this sort of surprising and delighting. And I feel like email is really where surprise and delight happens. Like that is the place, because it's the place where you can give somebody something special. It's a place where you can give something that you're only giving to them or to a small group of people. You can test out little messaging or gifts or opportunities. And it just feels like you're so much closer to them the moment they sign up than you were before, that you need to acknowledge that.
Like, how should marketers acknowledge that? We've kind of skirted around some of the details of like what goes into an effective email that drives relationships forward. We've talked like a little bit briefly about kind of just really showing up in the inbox and personalization, but like really, what are the tactics that, if whether you're in B2B, B2C, whatever industry you're in, what should marketers be focusing on to drive relationships forward using email?
Yeah, I mean, I think it always starts with, why did they sign up? So what got them on your list in the first place? If they got on your list because they kind of had to in order to make a purchase, awesome, good to know. But like, treat them that way. Slow walk that relationship so you're not like, wow, now that I have your email address, you're going to be really sorry. So that you're like, wow, every single interaction I've had with that brand has been stunning and interesting and, has made me feel valued. And they have given me sort of all of the reasons that I signed up for this brand in the first place, whether that's because I like their clothing or because I believe in their values or because I want to learn from them from a thought leadership standpoint. I think that matters a lot. So, that's sort of the first element, is like, why did they sign up, and like communicate accordingly. You now have all the tools at your disposal to be as segmented and regimented as possible about onboarding them into your email experience in the right way. To think of it truly almost like product onboarding, like here you are. Thanks for signing up. Here's what you can expect from us. And very soon after that, here's an example of something that's really valuable to remind you, to make you feel really good about the fact that you did that. And then I think, as you get out from that sort of starting point, it's just about relevancy more than anything else. It's about, making sure that you're understanding where they are in that life cycle journey, who they are, what kind of things they're interested in. And, again, it's personalization, but it's so much bigger than that. It's about giving them, things that actually are interesting to them. And I think that email is really it's the place where that can happen more readily than anywhere else, but it's amazing how it still doesn't always happen.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something about kind of uh thinking about where subscribers have come from, and that really struck a chord for me as well. Like their intent, like what is their intent going to be like? And you can use that to build really strong relationships. There are so many times where I'll be honest, there are plenty of brands out there, they have a subscription offer at the bottom of their website. It's like, hey, you'll get 10% off your first purchase if you subscribe to our emails. Well, I'll go ahead and I'll fill in my email address and I'll wait and I'll wait and I'll wait. And I still haven't received my 10% off. And like that immediately puts me on the bad footing with some brands. And like the easiest thing you can do there is just be super timely with your emails, provide the information that someone's asked for as soon as they've asked for, and then you'll start that relationship on the right foot. And the same thing can be applied for things like personalization tactics. Yeah, we all know personalization works, but getting it right is what matters the most. And the only way you can really do that is really understanding your audience, learning about them, learning about what they want, who they are. And
Mhm.
that's a little tricky on the personalization side of things. Like you have to build, like maybe it's a preference center. You have to figure out where your data lives, how you can best use that data. But then there's a whole other side of personalization that I think a lot of marketers don't necessarily think of when it comes to personalization. That's like open time personalization. That's like real time content that like is different based on when someone opens the email. And it can be so effective. And it's not that hard to really implement, I don't believe. But it can be a little bit challenging to figure out the right tactic, the right open time personalization content based on where they are in their customer journey or who they are or their persona. So like that's a whole other area of personalization that I think marketers have not tapped into yet to help support the customer journey.
It's so true. And I feel like when you start talking about sophisticated personalization, almost everybody that is in marketing gets a little bit nervous because of the cleanliness of their data. Like that's just it is, there is a danger anytime you're using personalization that your systems, while you have great intentions, that your systems aren't going to get it right. And so I feel like open time is such a great like sort of anecdote to that, where you're not building although, you could, but you're not necessarily building, 8 different personalized elements into the campaign itself that's based on your database, but you're doing it based on, where they open the email, when they open the email, what exactly, how many other people have interacted with the email at the time that they open it. There's lots of interesting ways to sort of get their attention. And I think that in today's world, it's funny, Jana, you and I were talking about this last week on the personalization front. There are so many bells and whistles that you have access to. There are so many, like you can now use animated GIFs. You can, sort of fake a video in an email. You can use, all sorts of interactive techniques, which are all built and are all much better than they used to be and all are much more foolproof than they used to be. But at the same time, they make people a little nervous. But it's because our inboxes are more crowded today than they have ever been. And, you always think about that sort of old marketing thing where the only thing you need an email to do is to get them to take the one next step. And the only thing you need a landing page to do is to get them to take the one next step. And so, the ways that we have gotten them to take the one next step in the email, sometimes we've noticed that animation works, that just gets their attention. It has them sort of sit with it for a little bit. Sometimes we've noticed that, sort of full engagement of the audience. Live polls, for instance, people love live polls when in our emails, but if we put live polls in every single email, it probably wouldn't work. So you have to sort of balance out what you use. And again, like you just have so many opportunities to kind of surprise and delight along the way, where if you're using the same tricks every time, you're not surprising anymore. So you just have to be careful on how you sort of measure it all out.
Yes. And those are still one-to-one experiences, right? Like they're still unique to each persona, to each person on that list every single time they open. So, and I think that's one of those areas where open or real-time content gets like, I wouldn't say frowned upon, but seen as like less sophisticated because it's just like something that you can add to an email and it's like you're not using data. There's no like a complicated system in the background that's really powering it. But that's still one-to-one personalization. Every single person who's opening that one email that you put a live poll in or a sentiment tracker in or whatever, or a countdown time, like every single time that email gets opened by an individual, it's different. There's going to be something
Yeah.
slightly different about it. And I think that's amazing and powerful and something that I wished I had 15 years ago when it was
I
starting email.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when suddenly we were able to put dynamic or animated GIFs in emails, and that was just like a whole new world that opened up to us. And now the toolbox is much larger today, and I think gives us all kinds of opportunities. But to your point, it's all basically about ways to segment your list in at scale in a variety of different ways. So, what used to be that we would just segment, based on, okay, this one's going to be for customers and this one's going to be for prospects. Now we can segment based on 17 different variables and create all sorts of different options within the email itself. And I think that, everyone is finding so much value in that too. The numbers speak for themselves about how much higher conversion rates go when you are even just segmenting versus, and it continues to creep up the more personalized you make it, the more it feels like a one-to-one experience. Where it makes me sort of wonder, like, just in the overall scheme of things, in 5 years, are all emails going to feel more like one-to-one experience? You know what I mean? Like, is that, are we going to continue to innovate on every level there? And will the more sort of mass sends kind of go by the wayside?
I kind of hope I hope there's a balance. I
Yeah.
think there's always a place. I'm not going to call them e-blast, batch and blast sends, but I think there's a place for those sorts of sends that are going out to the wider majority of your audience. Absolutely sure. What I think is going to change is like those are going to morph into and include some of those like one-to-one personalized experiences that we're talking about, so that they still are those like big sends that we do, but they're tailored for their individuals. But I think we're also going to see more sophistication when it comes to, like you said, like the buying cycle. Maybe we're not going to send that big send to people who are in that like 5% and are on the cusp of conversion. Like maybe that's something that we don't want to do. But I think there's going to be, I hope in 5 years' time, email marketers are not having the same conversation about debating whether ROI is something that we should be having as a North Star metric, and we've moved on from that. That's what I kind of hope, but who knows?
I agree. I think, well, and it's funny you sort of bring it back to the ROI thing. I do think that part of our obsession with ROI for, the last little bit has been helpful, where certainly no one is questioning the value of email anymore. Almost the opposite is happening, where, the powers that be that are really interested in growth metrics that are more short term than long term are very interested in, oh, wow, it looks like you're getting great results here. Let's go ahead and send another email. And I think there isn't an email marketer in the world who wouldn't slightly roll their eyes at the idea of, let's just send another email as a growth tactic, because that's not the way that the consumer expectations work. That's not the way that it feels like we're using that audience rather than letting that audience have a valuable experience that we're sort of curating along the way.
Absolutely. And I think we can probably like end this up, but I do have one last question for you,
Yeah.
Cynthia. Um, how should email marketers handle conversations when someone in their company asks them, what is the ROI of your email program? How should someone answer that question?
Well, I mean, it depends. Obviously, like everything in email, even that question, it depends. I think that, like, for the most part, I think we're obviously very lucky at Litmus that we have, a finance team and a budget team that understands the value of email. And I think the other thing that gets tricky with just talking about email in general is that what you're talking about is people and technology instead of an ad spend. And so what you're essentially saying is, I need another person on email so that we can deliver this kind of experience that we know will be better. So rather than focusing on the actual return, which hopefully they believe in at this point, focusing on what more you'll be able to do and what kinds of good experiences you'll be able to craft for audiences, moving forward. And then there's all sorts of data that can tell you when you personalize, you get better conversion rates. And then you can help your finance team understand that click rate means ROI. In simple terms, like here's what we're talking about here. Open rate and click rate are going to transition into ROI. But I feel like because it's not that you're just pumping money into AdWords and getting a certain amount of return out in the form of sales or leads, you're having to explain that this is a little bit of a microcosm of the funnel where I can't necessarily tell you the value of these 5 emails, but I can tell you that this type of person in my audience is most likely to convert after 8 months if they do, or something like that. Like there have to be data points that you can share that help you kind of unpack what we mean when we say ROI, because of course it has a high ROI. These are existing customers or old customers or people who like the brand on some level, which means we have to be even more careful about their experience rather than just send them more emails and assume that it'll all come out in the wash. It also is just funny. I feel like for the email marketers, in general, this idea that we wouldn't have thought of that already
Yeah.
just always cracks me up. Like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, you're right. We should just send more emails. Like it's not that we don't want to. It's not that we don't think that email is valuable. It's that it would actually backfire.
Backfire pretty spectacular as well, especially if you get just a little listing segmentation slightly wrong, or you suddenly start bombarding your audience in a matter of a week, an email every single day. Yeah, it's not going to be great. But I think that kind of wraps up what we wanted to talk about. I appreciate your breakdown on all things email ROI, Cynthia. It's been a great conversation. And I can't wait to share more about this whole narrative I feel like we're developing right now at Litmus about what the email ROI metric truly means to marketers.